Marty, thank you very much for being a guest on Can't Shovel Hurricanes. Right away, I could tell that you are not a Floridian because you showed up on time.
I thought you were going to say it's because I'm tan, and we all know that Floridians are all pasty.
No. Nothing could be further from the truth. Marty, you are a transplant, which is what I refer to people that are not originally from South Florida. And we've generated the podcast to be a resource towards people that are looking to move, thinking of moving. And it has really evolved into so much more than we ever anticipated. And it's really been special. But you have a really interesting story of how you became the CEO of the JCC. And I've been a member of the JCC in Toronto and in several locations. And I haven't had the opportunity to speak to the CEO. And now that I've got you in front of me, I want to know the evolution. And I want the speakers to understand, or the listeners to understand, what JCC looks like today, what it's going to look like tomorrow. And you're in a very unique situation where you're also in a gated community. So security is of utmost importance. So tell me a little bit about your background and how you arrived here.
And we have to do this all in under 4 hours. That's amazing.
No, but we'll do this in 2 parts, and we'll do this several more times. Yeah, no problem. Shoot.
Just kidding. First, I have to say to everybody out there, Chag Cinco de Mayo Sameach. Happy 5th of May. And it's too bad today isn't yesterday, because I always like to my James Earl Jones, and it goes something like this: May the 4th be with you.
I saw a lot of memes like that going around.
There you go.
I'm not a Star Trek guy.
It's Star Wars, but that's okay.
What's the difference?
Exactly. Exactly. Well, we got that out of the way. So I feel a lot better now. So now I can be comfortable and tell you about my journey to Florida, my journey to JCCs. So thank you so much for having me here. It's really a pleasure, and it gives one an opportunity to really reflect and look back on the many, many blessings that we have. And I'm all about the blessings, right? The fact that you and I are sitting in front of each other, we're looking out at this beautiful, sunny place that we are. We're breathing the air. We have health. We have vision. We have hearing. I truly appreciate every second of that. I think to take that for granted is insane.
I wish more people thought that way, and I've only recently started realizing how important that is in my own life. And when I have a shitty day or a moment, I realize it's because I'm thinking in the future or in the past. But yes,
we take for granted these gifts, and we can have a whole conversation about the sheer fact that we're sitting at a table with a bottle of water and gravity keeps everything still while this world is hurling around the sun. That's a much larger conversation, but
we can go there if you want.
We can, and we haven't even drank anything but water yet, so that's all good. But let's talk a little bit about the journey. So I didn't do this for you. I do this every day, so it's real easy. What you'll see is that I wear on my left wrist, and I'll show it to you. And it is a symbol of my uncle, Marty Haberer, who fought in
Airborne,
101st Airborne, 327 Glider Infantry, World War II, the Screaming Eagles, the real Private Ryan. This is the guy that really did it. And for those who said that Jewish boys, didn't fight in big units in the United States during World War II, totally not true. I mean, this guy was an incredible hero. He's my personal hero. He's been gone for, like 75 years, but, I make sure to bring him into this world through my mouth and through my mind and through my heart every single day. And because my father named me after his older brother at 5 years, I ask myself every day, what have I done today that merits having the name of somebody that did the things that he did and the sacrifice that he gave at age 19 and a half when he died on January 14th, 1945.
Wow, what a perspective.
So everything that I do is from that perspective, and I remind myself by wearing that on my wrist every day. Not that I need a physical, but I choose to put that on every single day.
That's amazing.
And so why do I start by telling you that story? Because my family came from Germany. But on both sides. My father was born in Offenburg. His brother, 5 years older, Martin, was born in Offenburg. My grandfather, Max, was a graduate of the University of Heidelberg, was a lawyer, was a judge, had success, received the Silver Star, the Silver Cross in Germany for valor in World War I. Only, of course, to be kicked out of Germany in World War II, after Hitler and the Nazis, and as every Jew was, had their citizenship pulled back, removed, and had to escape with nothing to the United States. And they came over here in December of 1937. And you asked me when I got here why I was in time, and I told you I was a Yekka, which is a term for German Jewish people, and it's kind of a little bit of a cynical thing that they tended to be on time or early, and they showed up for everything. Well, I do come from that culture, and those Yekkas, those German Jews, many of them ended up during the war in the Inwood section of Washington Heights, where the Bronx meets Manhattan in New York City. And so that's where the story begins, a story of escape, a story, unfortunately, where most of our families, my mother's side was from Frankfurt. My mother was born here, 13 years younger than my father, but her family came over at the same time. And on both sides, most of the family was killed off. So the few of us that made it over here, it was a rebirth and an opportunity to start anew. And you talked about people that get transplanted. So that's the ultimate transplant, to come from a different country with a different language and being chased out and essentially being taken in. And that opens up a whole other conversation about what America was, what America is, what America should be, in terms of giving people a second chance to come here. Anybody that would meet me would say I'm American, because I am. I'm 1.5 generations American, but it isn't all that long ago, right, in terms of time and space, where it could have very well be that I was speaking German and walking the streets of Germany, and the only reason I came here was because we got kicked out. It wasn't by choice.
Sure.
So, wow, right? It's like a total transplant story. And so, as I mentioned, my father and his brother were here. They were growing up in the Inwood section of Washington Heights. My Uncle Martin went to school for about 2 years, and then at 17, as soon as he could enlist, the year before he would have been drafted, he enlisted the day he could.
At 17,
you can enlist in those days, and at least I don't know what it is now, but in 1945, I guess he was about 1932 or 1933 when he went into the military. He he died in 1945. So 1942, when he went into the military, I guess it was about 17 years.
He died in action?
He died in action. He died in the air. He was shot down, parachuting into what they call the donut. He was in the Battle of Bastogne, and it was literally a death sentence. He was parachuting into this donut, surrounded by the Germans, to fight so that they would distract while the army came in from the other side, and ultimately the Americans win that Battle of Bastogne, and that kind of represented the beginning of the end of the war.
Yeah, it was a turning point.
Win the war on January 19th, 1945. He died on January 15th, 1945. January 14th, 1945.
Is he buried in France?
So he was buried there, and then his body was taken. He's in the Farmington National Memorial Cemetery in Long Island, and I have visited it twice, and it's an interesting and bizarre thing when you're young to see your name, Martin Haberer, on a tombstone. But it was nice to see a couple of Jewish stars among the sea of crosses in the military cemetery.
I never anticipated to have this introduction, and I'm grateful that you've done it. And I'll tell you why. I many years ago belonged to an event called the Dinner of Miracles, where young professionals, and at the time I was much younger, got to sit around the table with real live Holocaust survivors, so we can hear this story directly from them, and then we in turn can pass it on to future generations, because we are now living in a world where Holocaust survivors are essentially non-existent anymore, and the very few and far between that are still around, probably not able to articulate their points. So, and we will also come across, and we're already seeing it, as a lot of Holocaust deniers, and as we don't have any real live people anymore to say, hey, they were there. It's important that we relay that message to our kids and to the generations after and after. That way it doesn't become some sort of mythical story as some sort of reenactment that we put together in our head. But we were there. I saw these people. I met with them. I talked to them. I know their story. You can see the pain in their eyes. And many of them, for many years, refused to talk about their story until they realized how important it was to disseminate it to the future generations. So I did not expect that. I'm really grateful that you did that. Thank you.
It's, again, my honor to always tell Uncle Martin's story. And frankly, the guy that never gets enough credit is my father, because though my father was not the hero who fought in a war or died in a war, he is the hero that took the time to create a family and have 2 children that went on to each have 2 children, and now has, I have a grandchild. And, in that sense, he is the proliferator of life. And, he carried the mantle of, you talked before when we were talking about some numbers, the chai, right, which means to live life, and those that were the continuity and the bringers of life to a new place. I mean, none of us would be here without my father, Otto Haberer. So though I always talk about my Uncle Martin, to wear him on my wrist, I also wear my father on my heart. So he's a hero, but in a different way.
You talked about the past and the future. I want to focus a little bit more about the future. And there is a major evolution within South Florida and the movement of people that are moving down here. This is probably more applicable to the Jewish community, which is fairly large, especially in South Florida. And you've seen this evolution. You yourself are fairly new here. Can you elaborate a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I'm new and I'm old, as I started to tell you. Interestingly, and I do have to say that I wish I could tell you that I was this incredibly thoughtful and planful and strategic person. I'm actually not that at all. I very much am somebody who've lived my life. I almost consider myself a little bit, and when I had hair, almost looked a little bit like Tom Hanks. And when you think of Forrest Gump, right, that he found himself at the right place at the right time, and, he gets Bubba Gump shrimp, and he's getting awards, and he's playing ping pong, and all these things happen to him. He just laid himself back and he allowed life to take him where he was supposed to go. That has happened to me in a lot of ways. I ended up in Florida for the first time in 2002. I truly did not know what Siesta Key was. I thought it was a cocktail. Siesta Key cocktail was something I used to have when I was a vegetarian for 5 years in the first watch. I thought it was a yogurt, and God must have laughed every time I ate one of those yogurts, saying, "You're going to live there one of these days." And I actually, moved to Sarasota, Florida, which is a gorgeous place on the west coast of Florida. Very different vibe than here, Jewishly and in every way, but spent 13 years there, and then 8 years ago, decided to take literally the leap and get in a car with then my kids and my dogs and my wife, and we all went 2,500 miles, and we moved to Scottsdale in Arizona, where we can talk a little bit about that, but I know
Please.
You're more invested in
No.
Florida
I
story.
want to hear everything, and I know that there's what I call the exodus, right? It's California, New York, Toronto, Montreal. There's other locations as well, but those are the people that are moving into the United States. And it's one of 3 locations. So you got Arizona, you got Texas, and you got Florida.
Right, and I've got relatives in all of them. I literally have a niece that just bought a new house in Austin, went to school at University of Texas. I'm familiar with all this. My brother lived in Dallas for 9 years. He invested money for H. Ross Perot. So yeah, I'm familiar with all those major places. I've lived and entered those places either myself or through family. But yeah, so we had a taste of Florida for 13 years, left, and then came back, ironically, and again, never thought I would, but ended up coming back 2,500 miles, to be here, and I've now been in South Palm Beach County and at Boca Raton for a little bit more than a year. And again, why, you say, right? Like, what is this? It's this wash, that's sort of this wave that washed me from, to, and back. And I think you're right. I think that Florida is a remarkable energy point right now, and for many people, but obviously for the Jewish people. I mean, when you think about Jewish population, and most of your listeners don't know this, right? But you and I both know that there are 8 billion people in the world. It's a lot of people. The United States has about 350 million people, which is another thing most people don't know, because we are dwarfed by India, China, and so many places that have billions of people. We're not a big place in America, and yet we have such a big, like Jews, when it comes to Nobel Peace Prizes and things,
Presence.
we have a much bigger presence than we actually have
Sure.
physicality in the world. I mean, Americans, 350 million out of 8 billion. It's not huge. And Jews, right? So Jews, we have about 15 million people. 15 million people in a world of 8 billion people, which is like a drop of water. I mean, you see this new blue square that's been coming up. I don't know if you're familiar with that. but
I see it all the
that's
time.
the Kraft family has, and I think it's wonderful because it's highlighting anti-Semitism, which has been just, there for 2,000 years.
I'll tell you, I had, and this will be pertinent to you. I had some of the Zale crew on here, Stacy and Adele, and there was a clip that I posted speaking about anti-Semitism and what the impacts of it are, and how people are judged by a different standard. And the comments that I had specifically on one of the platforms on TikTok was just venomous. And yeah, it's like people don't understand it until you're in their shoes.
It's just so there and so deeply rooted, and for so long, it's going to be a very, very hard evil to expel from the human.
I don't think we can ever expel it. We can just teach ourselves and our kids to stand up and be proud. And you're not going to make everybody happy. You're not ice cream. You just do you. As long as your intentions are pure, your heart is pure, you're not out there with evil and malice intent. Who gives a shit what other people think? If they want, as long as they don't encroach and threaten your own security, the rest is just words.
But what's interesting about it to me is, right, there are some times where logical, rational people just can't understand, because what we've learned in business and in management, there's two different types of intelligence. There's intelligence, intellectual intelligence, and there's emotional intelligence. For the longest time, nobody ever measured emotional intelligence. And you wonder sometimes why the person not with the highest IQ isn't running every business, right? Sometimes a person of low IQ or middle IQ, or certainly seemingly not the brightest, person in the room, is the leader. And I think what a lot of managerial books and a lot of people come to realize in recent years is that emotional intelligence is a very powerful thing.
Absolutely.
And people with very strong emotional intelligence are indomitable. Their spirit is indomitable. They have a different kind of vision. They might not be able to win on Jeopardy, but they know how to get what they want, and they know how to achieve, and they know how to make things happen. And so I mentioned this in the context of anti-Semitism because you're right. I mean, kind of like you're 100% right. Who cares? To thine own self be true, and go. You want to hate, but you have to. You wonder on an intellectual level, why is it that people hate Jewish people, and for so long? Like, where did it come from?
Do you have an answer for that?
No, but I know where I sort of kind of know where it began, because it begins with the Jewish people itself, and I think that some of it had to do with the initial revolutions inside of Judaism, the maturation of Judaism, and in the early part of the Common Era after the BCE. I think what ends up happening is that the formation of Christianity, which in some ways is really the very first Reformed Judaism, comes along and questions, some of the historical things that have been going on in traditional Judaism. And I think that the early Christians, in some ways, had been discriminated against. They were Jews. The apostles were Jewish, and and literally were being chased and were being attacked and all these things too, as their new religion was forming. And I think it never got out of that. I think it started by them running and being chased and being receiving fear and being different. And I think that was really never forgiven. And I think as Christianity, when Constantine and the son of Helena forcibly turns the Roman Empire into into this gigantic Christian world, where literally today, out of 8 billion people, right, like 1 in 3 people is Christian. It's like over 2 billion Christians. I just think that began that process. And I think when haters came along, like Hitler, he built on that. He actually used it, as fuel and to personify, and that was a piece of it. But to me, it's not so much that it's hate towards Jews, because that's in essence anti-Semitism is how we define that to some degree. But I think it's this idea that to hate different people, right? To hate people that have a different outlook, to hate people that have different practices, to hate people that look alike, act alike, come from a similar place, and then to have the majority somehow misunderstand that or whatever. I think it's more important, frankly, to understand the element of hating the other instead of the biblical ideology of love thy neighbor as thyself. And as the great Hillel said, the rest of the Torah is commentary. Just love thy neighbor as thyself. That's it. That's the beginning and the end of the Torah.
I think that the overwhelming majority of people that you will meet in your life, you and I will meet, and most of everybody else, wishes that we wouldn't categorize people or generalize people, and genuinely and legitimately does love the other person. It is the small fringe minority that creates all the venom, all the hate, and in fact does the things that are most detrimental. But it's when ideologies perpetuate to benefit an individual that would normally not have like hate in their veins, but figures, well, you know what, maybe if I hitch my wagon towards this, I may benefit elsewhere, is when you start to really see things where people can take bits and pieces of something and then make it their own. And then it takes a life of its own. But I don't think that it's so prevalent yet. I just think that social media perpetuates things a lot more easily than it ever has before, but it's still by a small fringe minority that is very impactful.
Well, again, you're right about the social media. When you look at a guy like Kanye, for instance, right, and he's got more than 50 million followers, and there are only 15 million Jews in the entire world. Sure. It's such a powerful tool. If you turned 50 million of your followers against 15 million people, you do the math. It's just really powerful. But that's why I say that I think that the Craft project is genius, this little blue square, because for the first time, you're seeing social media used in the other way to combat that, to educate. And the little blue square, which I think shows, I believe the percentage is 2.4%. I think that Jews are 2.4% of American population, and I believe we're 0.02% of the world population.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't know exact numbers, but I do remember seeing those stats. But in South Florida, there is an overrepresentation of Jews and the Jewish community, which is partially one of the reasons why we decided to move down here, because our anchor was Donna Klein, Jewish Academy, and Zale. We were on a waiting list for both. And once we knew that those were green lighted is when everything kind of went into overdrive and our visas went into application and stuff like that. And I believe that we are still, I don't want to call it the pioneers, but we're certainly the early birds of people coming down here from other countries. But I don't think it is dwarfed by the number of people moving from other states, specifically California and New York, and I think Massachusetts as well is. But you'd be able to speak to that much more because you run the campus, and the campus is large. It has, how many schools does it have on it?
So I do have to correct you. While I would love to run the campus is 100 acres. The campus is owned by the Jewish Federation, and actually that is run by a gentleman by the name of Matt Levin, and he would actually have that distinction. I am the president and CEO of the JCC, the Adolph and Rose Levis Jewish Community Center, which does a big amount of the engagement and community building portion of what goes on the campus. But we are one of many institutions like Zale, which, by the way, is one of the JCC's 5 businesses. And there are a number of, family and children's services and JARC, which is, we talked about JARC. It's residential for special needs on campus.
And what needs are encompassed within that? Is there like a variety of special needs that you guys support?
Yeah, basically people that need to reside somewhere because they're not able to really live by themselves and they need assistance. JARC does a phenomenal job at providing a wonderful life on that campus and an opportunity to live among a community. So that's like the ultimate mitzvah. I mean, it's a beautiful, beautiful thing to watch. There's garden to table gardening that goes on there, and all sorts of cool stuff, and providing a quality of life that these folks would never get. Come out one day. I'll give you the tour of the campus.
I love that.
It's just. I mean, the things that go on every single day on that 100-acre campus is really, it's beautiful. I mean, it is the largest Jewish campus in North America, 100 acres. It's pretty big up on 95th Avenue South there, and it's and our JCC. For me, it's a tremendous honor and humbling to run a 2.5 acre piece of that. that is, as I say, charged with mandated being a doorway for many, many different kinds of people with different interests. I mean, I brought of one thing. I thought, what was I going to bring for show and tell? So today I brought you something we had about a month ago. We had our South Palm Beach County Pride Shabbat, where 250 people who had historically not really been identified and really may or may not have been participating in some things in the Jewish community came out and had a Shabbat service, collaborated with by 14 different organizations housed in our JCC. And it was a beautiful moment of acceptance, and I hate the word tolerance, accepting different people and just including them, inclusivity, and it's exactly what it is that I want to accomplish as the president and CEO of that organization.
What is it that you want to accomplish? If you had your vision, your goal, which is probably what landed you, the job here, because you got to look into the future, and you're looking at what I'd say is a very unique perspective, and not only a unique time, because you've got these flood of people that are moving down here. Florida, for many, many years, was thought of as a place you came to retire. Now it's a place where you come to establish roots. I'm one of those people, right? So you have to understand what people want. And the Jewish Community Center, how many of them are around the world? 100, 200?
So there's 170 Jewish community centers in North America. That's Canada and the United States. And then there are matnasim in Israel and other community centers worldwide. In the Ukraine, all over the world, there are Jewish community centers.
I have to tell you something really interesting that I just remembered what the Jewish Community Center meant to us in Toronto when we moved in. My parents immigrated from Israel in 1988, and they came on their own. My mom and dad, we stayed back in Israel with my grandmother. And then shortly thereafter, they purchased a house, ironically, in the peak of the market, with not so different than what I just went through here in Florida. And about a year later, we came back with my grandmother, my brother, and I. And they bought a house, but they couldn't afford to furnish it. And they were still, trying to find their way through the world and work and stuff like that. We almost exclusively for a year lived off of donated furniture that came from the Jewish Community Center. All the Chagim, we were given packages of support, food, stuff like that. And I remember driving with my mom and dad to people's houses that were donating and giving mattresses and couches, toys. I remember I had a box of toys that was supposed to come from Israel that never made it through. And for a 9-year-old, 8-year-old, that's devastating, right? And I just thinking about it, that's what the Jewish community meant to me. And then even further to that, I spent my entire youth, because my parents couldn't afford to send us to camp and do all that stuff, playing basketball and swimming. And my brother had his first job. He's 8 years older than me at the JCC in Toronto. So the JCC was like a saving grace for us. It was a support network.
So it's interesting. I think some of this you might even you either know or you're backing into accidentally, but one of the 5 businesses, I mentioned 5 businesses that we have right now here in South Palm Beach County, is we have a resale boutique doing exactly what you just said. And we do have Ukrainian families that are coming here,
You don't support just the Jewish community, right?
No. The thing about JCCs is they're always open to anybody. We believe in tikkun olam, which, as you know, is the Jewish phrase for improving the world. Improving the world is not only improving the Jewish world, it's improving the world. We care about everybody.
Of course.
We do have a Jewish bend, and we're very fortunate at our JCC because, as you suggest, there are so many Jewish people in this community. We do serve an enormous Jewish population here. The majority of people that do participate with us are Jewish, but there are many of the 170 JCCs around the country where a small percentage of their population is Jewish. It depends on where you reside and what the Jewish community looks like. But here, we haven't done an actual count in recent years, but post-COVID, the idea is that there may be as many as 180,000 to 200,000 just in South Palm Beach County. And I know in the state of Florida, when I was in Sarasota back in the day, we were already approaching 800,000 people. I'm sure that the state must have 1 million Jewish people living in it. And again, that may not sound like a lot, but in a world of 15 million Jews, 1 million in the state of Florida, Florida may very well be the second most populated Jewish state. If when you get to New York, maybe California, when you include everything. I mean, I think Los Angeles is like 500,000 Jews, but it could we're certainly, like, if we're not the second, we're the 3rd largest state of Jewish people, which is powerful.
Why do you think so many people are making South Florida home?
So I think for a bunch of reasons. As you suggested, in recent years, and there's new dynamics, right? There's post-COVID, or, as COVID is kind of evolving at this point, a lot of things happened. And I think that communities where historically people moved to, like, New York, where my family came, where a lot of people come when they're running, through Ellis Island historically. And
you think people are running?
People are always running. People are always running. I mean, remember, we always talk about the 1%, right? If you have an household income in excess of $100,000 or something, like if you make $100,000, I don't know what the number is these days, but I always remember when I was growing up, if you're making $100,000, you're in the 1%. Think about how many people live badly in this world, in this whole world. I mean, we go to bed at night. I'm living there in Pheasant Walk, and I'm going to sleep and I'm eating and I'm comfortable in this beautiful home. And then think about how many people are literally like looking to cut firewood or find firewood in the Ukraine or somewhere cold or somewhere miserable, or in Africa, and they're starving and they can't eat. And Syria, which has been going on right outside of Israel, right? I mean, we know what has been going on there for years.
Yeah, people somewhat forgot about that. They've been going through a civil war for 6 years right now.
Try to put yourself for 1 second, like what a day must be like to live in Syria.
Well, I can actually. I was just back in Canada. I was going back and forth for hockey, and we won't touch upon that because it's a very sensitive day for me.
I understand. I'm sorry.
And the gravity of our conversation wouldn't go there. But I was there for hockey, and I also got a chance to enjoy some of my mother's home cooking. A little bit too much, if you ask my wife, and my pants. But when I went back, one of the coaches that was helping my son out is essentially a refugee from Ukraine. There for 3 months, Canada opened up its doors, let them through, and he was saying it's bad. It's bad.
And when you say bad, that doesn't even begin to describe. Like, again, what is a day? You wake up, your eyes are half open all the time, right? You can't sleep soundly because you're worried about, dying. You're scrounging for the few resources that are around. Imagine what it must be like to try to, I remember when I visited, I've been very blessed by working in the Jewish community for 37 years, and I've been to Israel 44 times. I've been on numerous missions all over the world, to Ukraine, Kiev, Odessa.
Wow.
I've been to these places. I've been to Dnipropetrovsk and to all these cool places that most people haven't been to. I've been to St. Petersburg. I've been all over. I've been in Ethiopia. I've been all throughout Europe, and witnessed how Jews live, and where anti-Semitism has taken place, even when it was going on in places like Paris a few years ago. Certainly been back to Berlin, and seeing the healing, but knowing the history. And how cool was it to watch Fiddler on the Roof in German, not Yiddish, in German, in Berlin, at a theater where they have Stolperstein, stepping stones, of the Jews that used to run the theater there and were killed, during World War II. But I say this again because you ask, why do people run? And are people running? Yeah, they're running. Most people are running right now as we speak in this world, because most people have not found peace. Most people have not found shalom bayit. Most people don't have the blessings that we talk about, and a life of, relative security, whatever that means, that they actually don't, if you can set aside the basic need that my tummy is full and I have a blanket at night and a place I could rely on where I can actually get a good night's sleep and not worry that somebody's going to kill me. Unfortunately, too many people don't have that in this world.
Well, the people that are moving into South Florida, I don't think are obviously running those there. I'd say that, are in the upper echelons of compared to the world, of course, are moving down here, but they are running. I have my perspective on it, but I want to know what you think, your perspective on why people are coming.
All right, so let's talk about that kind of running. I think you're right. No, you're not running directly from Syria to South Florida,
Sure.
but yes, many of us ended up somewhere else in the United States. Maybe we chose to be there, maybe we didn't. And as we evolve, and as we become educated, and as we become competent, and as we begin to accumulate some level of wealth, which therefore allows us to control our destiny, we make choices about where we can go, right? As opposed to just ending up in Boston or in New York or wherever our parents happen to drop in. So now we can make choices. And the choices clearly, as you suggest, in recent years have been going to states like Arizona and Florida and Texas, for a number of reasons. Two of those states, as we just mentioned, are have plenty of tax reasons to want to be here. You don't pay state income tax in Florida or in Texas. In Arizona, it's just, for those of us, or from Israel, if you learn to love the desert, right? The desert, you either love it or hate it. I didn't know how I was going to be because I came from Florida, but I fell in love with the desert. I fell in love with cacti and nighttime blooming things that you never thought could give off these beautiful flowers and beautiful smells, and weather with 6% humidity, even when it's 112, believe it or not. I know it's a dry heat. It is totally a different heat. Trust me, I did it for 7 years. These are places you choose to live because they're some of the nicest places in the world physically, right? I mean, you come to Florida because you've got water, you've got beaches on both the coasts. I mean, you have got these gorgeous beaches. I mean, I always wondered when I moved in Sarasota the first time why it was so, in my mind, inexpensive relative to places like California and New York when you have all this beachfront property. And I guess people are figuring it out now. It's not so cheap anymore. I mean, to have those kind of resources around you physically, these are beautiful, lush places to live. Florida, I mean, it's green and it's beautiful. The weather is sensational. And of course, when it's not sensational, unlike our forefathers of 70 years ago, we have this thing called air conditioning, so you can stay out of the heat, right? So you can play your pickleball at 8 o'clock in the morning, and then you stay inside the rest of the day, and then you can come out for your night walk or whatnot. So people choose to be here. The other thing too is that we've had leadership that have been very wise in terms of the economics, and it's a place where it's pretty easy if you're entrepreneurial. And when I say Florida, but Florida, Arizona, Texas, and other states, these are places where people aren't just coming, entrepreneurs are coming. And all the emerging businesses of technology, AI, all of these things, this is the places where they're landing. Environments where it's pretty friendly to open businesses, to take chances, to grow your wealth, and to provide jobs. So job growth in these states is very high right now. And so, why wouldn't you want to flock to a place like this? The other thing is the affordability. I think of New York. If I wanted to go back personally, if I wanted to live in New York right now, I would be hard pressed to do so, because the home that I live in here, to replicate it in New York, it would probably be about 5 times what I paid for it here. The lifestyle is so expensive, certainly in New York City. You've been reading like I have recently, where somebody went into a Zabar's and they charged, $26.99 for a ham sandwich. Trafe, by the way, but a ham sandwich. So $26 for a sandwich. I mean, my God, the inflation and all the things that are going on, it's almost unlivable to be in places like that. If you've been to San Francisco and you go to places in California, it is staggering. You literally trip over people sleeping in doorways. I mean, the homelessness and the dirtiness of the cities and the poorly kept conditions in those places, the bad management of some of those cities in those states is unbelievable. And you're seeing a tremendous outflow. Now, people who have wealth, so what they do, I know, I was like you. I came here a year ago. Why was I able to do it? Because a young couple from San Diego was willing to come with oodles and oodles of money and ask me my price for my house, whatever it's going to take to get me to pay, to leave. And I took their money, and I knew that I was going to have to do the same thing when I came to South Florida. But that is what creates this movement of people. I mean, it's the Californians that are coming into Arizona, that are coming into Florida.
Well, why now? Why do you think that people didn't realize that that this was such an undervalued, and I say grossly undervalued space, not just from a real estate perspective? I'm talking from a lifestyle perspective. Why do you think people are doing this now?
I think the secret is out. As sometimes happens, the secret comes out late. I also think, too, that, and I hope we don't get in this direction because it's just a difficult direction to go in, but politically, I've never seen in my lifetime, in my 59 years in this world, such strong feelings about politics. And I think, there are certain states, right, that have certain political majorities that some of the people don't agree with those points of view. I see this all the time. I'm sitting in delis here, and you listen to people's political thoughts, and there's a reason why people move to Florida in their political aspirations, generally speaking. There's a reason why people are leaving California, because they have different views than what the governing factors are in those places. And that has a surprisingly large impact on the way people foresee the future in those places. in the way America is headed, in the way the country is being governed, in the way those states are being governed. And it is a factor. I do think it's a factor.
Where do you see the future for South Florida, and specifically your space in the world? But it does. I don't need you to just speak to the JCC and the Jewish community. I mean, as a whole, I have my perspective of things, but I don't have a sober point of view, to be honest, yet, because I'm still in my honeymoon, drink from a fire hose phase where everything's coming at me and I don't know what I like and don't like yet. I can tell you how difficult it's been, but I love the fact that you talked about economics. And for someone like me and my wife, which are both entrepreneurs, it seems it's very evident here that if you are willing to work hard, if you are willing to take risks, you never know the outcomes. But what you can see is that the ceiling is way higher here, or almost non-existent, than it's been for me coming from Toronto. So I can't speak about other locations, but I do hear people coming from other states saying similar things.
Well, yeah, in Toronto, listen, I've been to Toronto. I like Canada very much, but again, you know the politics of Canada, and also Toronto. Many of us have become super acquainted with it. If you get into HGTV and things like that, you know, you see what the homes are going for, and you know how expensive
it's wild.
It's so expensive to live in Toronto that, again, you've hit a ceiling there, right? It's very hard to live there. You can have a tremendous amount of wealth, but if you are willing to take that wealth elsewhere, you could live so much better than you can.
You get lots of value for sure out of it. And then there's day-to-day stuff. Like I find the education system here on the private school, although my kids came from a wonderful private school in Toronto. We really loved it. We would have never left if it wasn't for the political climate plus other things. We find here that, like, I think it's the location, not just the educators. You know, when you put that whole mix together, to be far superior to what we had, because I love the security.
So let's talk about the location for a minute. So I have both the very warm and fuzzy feeling, and then I have my concerns. Now, I have spent the last 25 years of my life, so half my life almost, living in the state of Florida or living in Arizona. And, you know, obviously those are like, you know, hot spots, literally hot spots for warm weather, comfortable places, places where people to go to retire, choices where people go because there's a number of days of sunshine, the impact that has on depression, the impact that has on, you know, just being happier and being warmer. And as you get older and your body's joints stiffen up and not being in cold weather. And as I'm looking in your thing here, you can't shovel hurricanes, but you don't want to have to shovel snow. You know, those are a lot of the reasons why people have historically come here. The flip side of that is one of the reasons I felt a sigh of relief when I left Arizona. They have tons of people moving to Arizona, and they have a water drinking problem. And the only thing that brings me comfort is I've watched the Israelis invent the desalinization of water, and I say to myself, well, why can't we do that in Arizona and start drinking out of the Pacific Ocean? I mean, it's doable. I mean, it's expensive, and the water has to travel, but it can be done. They haven't gone there yet, and all you see is this diminution of water and more people coming, and I begin to wonder, like, how are they going to, like, keep people drinking water?
Wow, I never even thought about that being an issue.
Scary, yes. And I'm not talking about, like, you know, 100 years from now, right? I'm talking about, like, in the next 20, 25 years as these places grow, water. It's like, it's not a simple thing. Now, if we can desalinate the water, maybe we've found a solution. But in the current environment, Arizona has a severe drought and severe drinking water problem. Now, all that rain in California might have given us a little bit of a pause for the moment, but it's a momentary pause. I mean, there's just too many people drinking too much water and using too much water in Arizona and in that area. And in Florida, well, water isn't an issue. We got plenty of water. Water's an issue because we have so much water. Being underwater at our elevation. You know, living on the West Coast, we always worried about that hurricane that was going to come. That literally, they talk about the pancake, you know, the flipping of the of the Gulf of Mexico, literally flipping over and just drowning everybody, like the Yam Suf. I mean, it's a little scary. And I've been here then, in those times, and then I've been here for 2 hurricanes, and we see the changing of the climate. As I came here, I flipped into my phone like we all do, and there was an article about the insanity of the amount of temperature rising in the oceans around the world, right? I mean, as we're sitting here talking, the water is warming, and I don't mean to be,
Oh, listen, this is your perspective.
A Steckeldreher, but the pot stirrer, for those that don't know what that means out there. But yeah, I mean, as temperatures go up here, I can tell you, it's a lot warmer here in South Florida than it was when I was on the other coast. Maybe that's normal. But I think it's getting warmer here. Most people that told me that they've been living here for 30 years will tell you that the winters have gotten shorter. I actually have a wood-burning fireplace in my house. I love it. I used it for 5 days this past year.
Oh, my God.
5 days, and in a very small period of time. But, yeah, it is getting warmer, and I do worry about, because we come here and people keep coming like you're talking about, and in the meantime, it's getting warmer and warmer and warmer. What are the implications of weather here? What are the implications? I've seen tornadoes here in the short time I was here. Destructive tornadoes.
There was one a couple of days ago.
And there was one 6 months ago, not far from the Lakes of Delray, where my father-in-law lives, that actually did damage in the Home Depot parking lot. Look, this stuff does happen. The question is it happening more frequently? Is it going to be happening more and more frequently? I know that when we had a bad hurricane that just missed us and hit Fort Myers, as one did here this past year when I lived in Sarasota, for a period of time, it slowed the amount of people that started moving here because, the immediacy of it was, I'm not going to move to a place where potentially my house can get, blown away. And then people forget and they start moving here again, and then you get that whole cycle again. So that's the negative side, right? That could potentially cause you, like, suddenly it's like, oh my God, I live in Florida. Like, I want to move to a cooler place because the world is warming. Why do you want to be in a hotter place when the whole world is warming? Maybe you want to live in,
Toronto.
Yeah, or Colorado, right? Like, where it's just a lot cooler. So that's the negative side, but the plus side, like you talked about location, and where you talked about just, the advantages and the comforts of being in this literally physical space of the country where the soil is fertile. And it's, it reminds one very much. I know Israelis love to live in the state of Florida. They love to live in the state of Arizona because it reminds them of Israel. I mean, it's right. In Israel, you've got the desert, and you've got a lot of the similar. I don't know if you're a gardening guy. I am, so I know all the flowers here, and it's the prachim, and it's just nice to be able to have beautiful. People used to comment on my gardenias in Florida, and, you can grow those things here. You're not going to grow gardenias and, cordylines and shufflera in New York City. That just doesn't happen.
So from what I'm hearing from you, it's like the cat's out of the bag. South Florida still, I think, is grossly undervalued, and I keep saying that because it really is. And I think the type of people that are moving here are, quote-unquote, the right kind of people. And what I mean by that is people that want to build families. People are not here. There's nothing wrong with being a snowbird, and there's nothing wrong with being transient. This is still a vacation hotspot. It's a major part of the economy here. I think that's incredible, and you have access to that when you live here. But the communities that are forming, and I can tell from my end of the world, like, it's been all about community. I was introduced to you via the community. And it's such a strong community that it gives you comfort when you come here and you reestablish and you start brand new and you don't know anybody, and you see that people are willing to, when you reach out your hand, somebody's willing to greet you and meet you halfway and support you and support your businesses and support your family and have functions where, people can get together. That's a really cool thing to have when you left families and you left everything else that is behind. Although it's a 3-hour flight, and I do have family coming to visit me. In fact, they'll be flying in today to watch the hockey games here. But it's really, sometimes it's hard to describe, and you have to be in my body to understand how cool it is to be able to say to somebody like, hey, Marty, can you please come on the podcast and talk about your perspective of the world? Because you just came here, a year ago, and you're a busy guy and you have a lot of responsibilities, and you did. And that speaks volumes to the way the community, specifically the Jewish community that I'm immersed in, handles its people and the support.
You just raised a huge point, and the word is community. And community, for the last 20 years has taken a beating. You have books like Bowling Alone, and, this idea that community has kind of broken down. And I agree with you. I think one of the nice things about the Jewish community in Florida is we are a community. We have a campus. We welcome people. One of the nice things I remember when I came to Florida the first time, and again this time, I was here like a week last year in April when my at the time board chair invited me to her house among some of her closest friends with my wife to have Pesach together, which, I mean, that just doesn't happen in a lot of places. In a lot of communities, if you didn't play like softball with people in ninth grade, you're never going to break into that.
Sure.
That family, you're never going to really be from there unless you live there for 100 years. Here, because people are from everywhere, the general culture is very accepting of letting new friends into their circle and opening up their doors to people. I have found that here, and I found it in Arizona as well, which is really nice. It's easy to integrate and plug yourself into a new reality. Look, you and me sitting across the table, I could see you and me a week from now going out and have a beer.
100%.
And we probably will. And I'll buy the first round. But I think that's beautiful, that it's very easy to make new friends here. That's one thing. The other thing about community where I want to tie in the JCC a little bit is, I've been reading articles the last couple of days that are coming out. There's a lot of research coming out now about loneliness. And, everybody understands that in the wake of COVID, but apparently a lot of this research was done pre-COVID, that a lot of human beings are extremely, extremely lonely. And we hear about loneliness in senior citizens, but people in general are suffering from a lot of loneliness in this technical, social media world where there's just not a lot of human interaction, and people are lonely and they're sad and they're depressed, and it causes mental illness and all these other things. And you know what the antidote is? The JCC. The JCC is an antidote. We are a place you can come to whenever you want. You could walk the halls, you could look at the art, you could participate in, Jewish film festivals, 86 of them in the month of March that we just had. You can.
And is that for all ages?
It's for everybody.
Everybody.
For everybody. I mean, if you get on that campus, there's something for everybody. You mentioned Donna Klein. We've got these day schools and yeshivot, high schools and elementary schools. We have Zale with the preschool kids, and therefore there are preschool parents. We have, chronologically gifted. That's my way of saying senior citizens. Who can come out and
never heard that.
They want to get out, right? They want to sit and play canasta. They want to play mahjong. They want to sit, Company C, military veterans that want to sit down and talk about people like my Uncle Martin, who thankfully lived and didn't die in the war. And I'm actually going to speak at one of those in another couple of weeks. I mean, I get to interact with so many people. I don't have time to be lonely and depressed. I'm with community. We build community. And the other thing I love to see is that we have a complete Jewish community here. There are places that I've lived where we've had some tiles in the mosaic, but some were missing. When I lived in Sarasota, a very, very small portion of Orthodox Jewry has come to live on the West Coast. Here, it's booming. I mean, right outside our campus, all the local housing and stuff, you have a tremendous, tremendous movement of Orthodox Jews coming from New York, many from New York that are coming to live here. They're finding comfort in Orthodox communities that are building and popping up, synagogues, congregations, all built around their communities. And these communities are strengthening the overall mosaic of the Jewish community, which obviously has Reform and conservative and Orthodox and humanistic and completely unaffiliated. But that's the beauty of it, is the entire mosaic is here to build something beautiful here.
Of the conversations that I've had with people now that we've made this journey down here, there are always a couple of overwhelming points that always trump, the conversation, and it's healthcare, it's education, and then I can't leave my family, right? Those things are important, and if COVID's taught us anything, and the studies you're talking about, is that we're social beings, right? And leaving our sphere of influence and our families, our backbones, our people who we turn to in times of challenge and difficulty, it's hard to leave. But knowing that there is people to turn to here, I'm not selling Florida by any stretch, but I'm saying to people that if you do decide to make the move, there are resources and kindness, and for Canadians, I know there's this stigma about Americans not being so nice, and I'll tell them, don't conflate being nice and being polite. Okay, maybe they're just a little more crass, and then I'd put that more on the New Yorkers. They're more to the point, but they are certainly kind and welcoming and warm. So it's absolutely not true. Marty, if people wanted to find out more about the JCC and what it has to offer, and we didn't even get to the direction of where I think it's going to go and stuff like that, I'm going to definitely have to have you on. again, we chatted quite a bit over the phone, and I'm afraid that we just need more time. But how can they get a hold of you or find out about the JCC?
I'm the easiest guy. I mean, I think the simple biggest thing that I do is make myself, the visible person to contact, and I'll throw it right out there. If you want to get to know the JCC, I will give each person, an individual, a group, a small group, a large group tour. Call me at 480-886-9009. That's my cell phone number. I hide from no one. That's my number. If you want to find me, come see me. I will greet you. We'll have a cup of coffee, and I really do believe you build community one person at a time, eye to eye. You look people ayin la'ayin, and you look them eye to eye, and you have to be. You just have to be on all the time and willing and able to take calls and turn things around and text. You can text me at that number. Call me if you want to know more about the JCC, how to get engaged. If you want to meet me, that would be great. I also do a weekly Shabbat message, which anybody can see.
I get it.
See? I hope you like it.
I do.
Thank you, because I try to keep it brief so that people actually want to read it.
I get it.
Good. And so those are some of the ways that you can begin to get a toe into the JCC.
Is there a website specifically for your JCC?
Yeah. Let's see.
I'll put it in the comments for everybody.
Yeah, I'll let you do that.
And the description.
Yeah,
Marty.
it's all here on my card, and I'll give it to you.
Marty, you're a mensch. Shabbat shalom, and thank you for being here.
Toda, gam lecha, and really a pleasure. Thank you.